Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all doing well. And today, my friends, we're going to be talking about what units that are going to be coming with Immortal Empires that I think will be very, very good in Warhammer 3 multiplayer, more specifically Domination mode. So as we do approach the Summer Championships, which are going to be taking place on July 9th and 10th, we of course know that it's going to be taking place using the Immortal Empire. So we're going to be seeing all the old world goodness back in the game, and man, oh man, I'm certainly excited. So recently I reinstalled Warhammer 2, fired this bad boy up, and I was just thinking which units here are going to be the real sleepers so that people won't really expect that will be very, very strong. So on that note, let us begin. The first unit I do think that's going to be super good is going to be Shades. Now, looking through the Dark Elf roster, there wasn't much to be excited about in my opinion, but the Shades really kind of called to me. Now, I don't think it's going to be a unit where you see like 3 or 4 or 5 Shades just all over the place, but seeing like a Shade or two in your army, you're sitting there, you're comfortably fighting over the middle objective, you have something on the side. It could be a Chaos Warrior, it could be some Plague Bearers, whatever, right? And suddenly a Shade with dual weapons rolls up. You don't see it coming at all, so you don't have the preparations to defend your objective. And they bring some Dark Riders to follow up. The Shades just absolutely pound whatever's on the objective. And then when they soften it up, they can charge in, pull in some Harpies even to support, and just really, really crumble side objectives. I think that Shades are going to be really good for positional play for the Dark Elves, and I hope to see them in action. And that's one of the things that I think Domination mode does very well is making units that previously weren't amazing actually very, very good in terms of, seeing some action. So yeah, I think Shades are going to be a good unit. I don't think we're going to see like, more than 3 in any builds, but I do think there's going to be situations where you consistently see 1 Shade in every Dark Elf build just because of the utility and their ability to really pressure the side objectives. Next up, this is kind of a general category of units that I think will be very good in Domination. It's going to be medium range artillery, like hard hitting, organ guns, Hellblaster volley guns, flame cannons, and let me explain why. So if we're talking like land battles in Warhammer 2, the range on those bad boys isn't amazing, right? So typically your opponent's going to see it. They're going to have a ton of time to position around it. Most people are going to be bringing artillery sniping tools in land battles anyway. So, arty doesn't usually get its fair shine there. So there's going to be overcasted spirit leeches. There's going to be arrows of carnage from the wood elves, all that kind of stuff that really just shuts down your artillery. So, land battles often that would be very, very standard. And you'd have this like weird skirmishing phase where, their people are just sniping each other's artillery, and whoever ends up having one left is going to force the other person to come to them, right? But in Domination mode, the thing is, most of the maps aren't that big, with the exception of like Arnheim, for example. If we're talking Battle for Itza, if we're talking Death's Pass, the spawn point in the middle of those 2 maps essentially is within, organ gun range of the 2 main objectives, right? So that's going to be super huge. Let's say you're in like pitched fighting and suddenly your opponent summons a fat erect organ gun right on that middle objective or that middle spawn point. They're going to be able to hammer all the middle points and it'll instantly be in range. That is such a powerful tool because your opponent isn't going to have time to necessarily react to it instantly. Of course, they might have some things on the battlefield like bolt throwers, whatever. They might have some tools to kind of blast it down, but it's pretty unlikely. And I do think that the organ gun, Hellblaster volley gun, and these type of mid-ranged artillery pieces are often going to be better than cannons and are going to be very, very solid. Looking forward to using them. Now, another big winner, which I think for sure is going to be an unholy tyrant, is going to be the Ark of Sotek. Obviously it is an objective-based game, but really in many ways, if you're looking at like the Battle of Itza, it's not like, yeah, the objectives are very important, but really the fighting it's more like a land battle with like reinforcements under those circumstances and in that map. And I think that's going to be the design direction going forward that we'll probably be seeing from Creative Assembly is those kind of maps. But I do think Ark of Sotek is, not only a decent unit in a bunch of different matchups, like Ark of Sotek against Nurgle, against Khorne, against all these like melee-focused demon factions, I think could be pretty good. And even against Tzeentch, like it has a lot of armor. Tzeentch shooting doesn't have like crazy AP outside of the Flamers, right? But when push does come to shove on top of an objective, Ark of Sotek is just going to be launching snakes everywhere, doing a ton of damage, and I think it's going to be a really good unit. And I think like almost every Lizardman player, regardless of the matchup, will probably have like one Ark of Sotek. If it's a very close game and you're just fighting tooth and nail over an objective, the Ark of Sotek is essentially like a bunker buster. You send it in there, you launch snakes all over, and Samuel L. Jackson's going to get pissed, so should be good. Next up, I think another really underrated unit is going to be the humble Soros. I think Soros warriors are very durable for their cost. They I believe have 60 armor. It's been a while since I've really kind of played a lot of Warhammer 2, but they have 60 armor, really good weapon strength, really good staying power, and I honestly feel that they're going to kind of function in a similar way to Plague Bearers, where you can just swarm them in droves on objectives, and they're going to be pretty damn hard to remove. I mean, how many of you guys remember Warhammer 2 multiplayer? You're playing against a Lizardman player. And there's just these like units of Soros that just won't go. They just keep rampaging around the battlefield, chasing you, and that's the only downside. Is of course is their rampage, but generally speaking, I think they're going to be very good bullies and will be very sustainable on those objectives, and of course in fighting. Nothing wrong with those bad boys. So next up, we have grenade launchers from the Empire. I think grenade launchers are going to be awesome. They were very, very good in Warhammer 2, I would say. More niche, but very good when they were useful, right? Like at clearing out vampire count infantry, and that's really the big thing that I want to get to, is that domination mode is, at least with the 7 factions we have right now, I like to joke that we only have 6 because Cathay sucks so bad. But with the 7 factions we do have, the infantry-focused factions seem to be very dominant, and I think that's because of the lack of good shooting. Now, people are going to be like, oh, but Turin, you have Cathay and you have Kislev shooting. Well, yeah, Kislev actually can shoot things off objectives effectively. The reason why Cathay can't is because they can't effectively peel Furies. So basically, their shooting just gets shut down by Furies and Cultist summons, which just sucks, right? But grenade launchers are pretty quick. They can, Furies will eventually catch them. But the thing is, the Empire has good peeling. They can use Pistoliers to shoot Furies out of the skies. They have Knights of the Blazing Sun to just absolutely run over Furies. The Empire has teeth, unlike Cathay. So grenade launchers in an infantry-focused meta are going to be so good. Hey, your opponent's sitting some Khorne Warriors on a side objective or Plague Bearers. They're going to get nuked by the Steel Faith and Gunpowder of Sigmar. I think grenade launchers, based on what we've seen, will be very good. Now, the next one is admittedly a bit of a tinfoil hat thing. This is like my tinfoil hat. I know it's probably wrong. Most of them I'm pretty confident about in this list. This one is my tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, and I really, really hope it's true. And it's going to be the Luminarch. Now, the Luminarch is a sniping piece. In Warhammer 2, it's a little bit easier to dodge it and maneuver. And what ends up happening in Warhammer 2 is people just kind of dodge it and juke it and waste your ammunition. They kind of play the long game against it, and then they'll just like goon it because it's such an expensive piece. But imagine this. You're playing against Nurgle. You're playing against Khorne. There's a big blob fight going on one of the objectives, and they have a big lord. It could be Skarbrand. It could be any of these big demon characters. It could be, what's the name of the big guy on? The giant toddler. It could be Kugath Plaguefather, right? And you summon out that Luminarch and you just dunk on those guys. I actually think they're going to be pretty good. And even considering people start with smaller armies in Domination, 9,000 compared to about 12.4 for old land battles. But I mean, that equalizes pretty quickly. But I am not against starting with a Luminarch and just taking some miracle shots. And honestly, it doesn't do terrible damage against bunched up elite infantry anyway. So I think the Luminarch might be okay. Now, if CA does like some sort of a job of fixing its like weird aiming and turning issues and things like that, I think it could actually be a piece that I would love bringing as an Empire player. Next up, we have Mourngulls from the Vampire Coast. Now, these guys were really OP when they first came out, but they got nerfed. And then they become like decent, like utility, like a more utilitarian unit. Like it's something you use based on the matchup. But I think in domination mode, having at least 2 Mourngulls in your army will be very standard for Coast because they have stock. So, somebody's defending a side objective with some Nurglings, whatever, chaff units, and even an armored unit, and you can creep some Mourngulls around there. You could maybe soften them up a little bit with some deck droppers, and they're going to be like, oh, look at this guy, deck dropper harassing me. It's not really doing anything anyways. And then boom, surprise, some Mourngulls pop out and they just like rip your guys apart on the objective, and they have decent capture weight themselves, right? So I think that the Mourngulls are going to be actually kind of a sleeper unit and could be actually kind of good. Next up, we're on to some Wood Elf units. And, honestly, I think most of the Wood Elf roster is going to be really good, but one unit that really stood out to me based on the current meta is Deepwood Scouts with Swift Shiver Shards. Obviously, domination mode, having like the massive range is nice, but, getting closer and getting to that middle objective is going to be a really quick thing, especially since they have Vanguard deployment. So like I said, they have Vanguard, they hit super hard, they essentially fire 2 volleys, and they do magic damage. So all these annoying demon units, like, if we're talking any of the Slaanesh demons, we're talking Bloodletters, Plague Bearers, whatever, the magic damage will surpass their physical resist, and they'll be really good. And I think Deepwood Scout ambushes are going to be crazy. They have stock too, right? So you stock up like a couple Deepwood Scouts, you creep up on an objective, shoot them off, and just take it for yourself. Seems super good to me. So next up, we have 2 units that I'm going to kind of lump together, Globadiers and Mortars. I think for Skaven, they're going to be crazy good. Like, just because Skaven are like, they're going to have their issues in domination. Like, aside from Stormvermin, which are kind of low leadership also, and the ROR, which is unbreakable, I think Skaven are going to have some problems like stabilizing on objectives. So the best way is just to absolutely massacre your opponent's stuff, right? And Globadiers will be really good for like slow pushing people off objectives, and of course just trading efficiently. They've always been good. And Mortars, I think, will be awesome because Mortars don't really give a shit what map you're on. If you're on Galleon's Cove, great, we'll shoot over the giant hill. You're on, Eye in the North, sounds good. You're on Itza, sounds good. They really don't care about the map, and they generally always pay for themselves. Now, another Skaven unit that I think is going to be awesome are Death Runners. Death Runners are very good for pretty much the same reason we've articulated as it pertains to other stalking units. Death Runners are going to be able to creep around in the shadows and just gank a back objective. I actually think Vikstrin's Death Squad is going to be really good because they even further accentuate the strength of sniping something off a back objective. And what's cool about that is it's very similar to like other RTS games, really. Domination mode has made Total War have many principles that are conventional in RTS, but weren't really common in Warhammer before that, or Total War, I should say. Like intercepting people's reinforcements, a huge RTS tactic that you see in Age of Empires and StarCraft, and also attacking someone's base essentially and forcing them to overreact in their base and then using that time to take ground. That's something that you now see in Domination mode, which I love because I'm like an RTS. I love RTS. RTS has like literally been my life for years. It's just my passion, and I'm really happy to start seeing some traditional RTS elements in Total War Warhammer, which is obviously one of my favorite games of all time. So Death Runners, you get a Vikstrin's Death Squad, you go kill some, let's say, Chaos Marauders on the back objective. Your opponent's going to summon in a couple units, expensive ones probably, to go kill them. You can run away, use the globe to disappear, and then suddenly you're gaining ground on the middle because they overreacted in the back. See what I'm saying? So Death Runners, you heard it here first. Now, next up, these guys were really good in Warhammer 2, but not so because of Burning Head, Tomb Guard. Now, I've noticed playing with the Ogre Kingdoms and using the Fire Belly that Burning Head really doesn't do that much damage, and a lot of those wind spells got heavily nerfed in Warhammer 3, it would seem. So I think if they don't do that much damage, I think Tomb King's players who just want to spam a ton of Tomb Guard are really going to enjoy themselves, and I think they'll trade pretty efficiently. They're essentially unbreakable, they'll hold on objectives, and honestly are just a solid unit, really, but I think they were just not used because of just the Burning Head thing and like the magic that just eviscerated them. But now, times are changing. So last, but most certainly not least, it is going to be the Bloated Corpse. Now, I think these guys might actually be okay in Domination because of the spawn points. So just imagine you're playing Vampire Coast, you have a gun line back there. It could be a combination of handgunners, death gunners, whatever, mortars. Your opponent is going to want to shut those down, right? They're going to be sending perhaps cav back there, maybe trying to get some infantry by you. And then you can just summon in one of those thick bloaty boys and just absolutely detonate on their infantry, because one of the big issues with bloats is you can see them coming most of the time, and it's pretty obvious. I mean, there are a couple gimmicks. You can hide them in trees and bushes, and they've had their time in the sun, but really have never been actually good and competitive. But in Domination mode, you're going to be able to just summon them on a whim, just right behind your opponent, and or on top of your opponent, I should say, and they really won't have much time to react. And I think this is going to make for some of the funniest moments in all of Total War Warhammer 3 when we see the glory of the bloats. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this list. Let me know if there's anything you think I missed. So again, we're just kind of talking about sleeper units. So there's some very obvious things that are going to be good, like the entire Vampire Counts roster, and basic units across the board that have been effective, like Knights of the Blazing Sun. But in general, these are like sleeper units that I think people might not be thinking about 100%, although I guess Skaven mortars are kind of obvious. But aside from that, sleeper units. Let me know what you guys think. Be curious to hear your thoughts. And that is it for now. We'll see you guys next time. Very hyped for the Immortal Empires, and hopefully it will come sooner than later.